Good.
Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And now we're doing this under the warning of the anti-Christian bias that, you know, the great cry bullies, the great persecutors who are the most persecuted. Let's make sure not to hurt their widow feelings.
Oh, but they such delicate little snowflakes. Oh, the poor little Christian babies. Did they hurt your feefies?
Yeah, because apparently there's just atheists, and I've actually seen a senator say that the atheist category includes Muslims. So yeah. Like,
oh yeah.
The
a long time ago, atheist category would have included Christians too.
Congratulations, Lawrence. You're a Muslim.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah,
I love how words work.
Everybody not Christian. Everybody not Christian is
everyone joins a Milwaukee.
And a tiny.
Everyone joins Milwaukee Muslim Discord.
Yeah, that's totally a thing. You know, I have to say there is this weird thing where the most privileged feel the need to feel persecuted. And I think it's a self-righteousness thing. It's like when someone overcomes a great difficulty and we all say, oh, that was so good. We admire their courage and their determination and their grit to stick it out. And then someone else goes and sabotages their life so they can have a really great story about how they overcame persecution. And you're like, no, asshole.
Yeah. And I know that as a matter of fact, you know, with the satanic panic and all of that you know, atheists were, you know, heavily and are heavily persecuted quite a lot, but we don't ever mention that. I mean, I think I'm probably this is the first time I think I've saying it myself that I've heard it said in more than a decade. But Christians moan and that they're how they're so put upon constantly. And they feel like somehow they're vindicated.
Yes.
By being corrected, which I never understood.
Martyrdom is like their favorite thing.
I mean, everybody's trying to be like Jesus, you know? So it's like almost a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. Like, oh, he was persecuted. And he said that we would be persecuted for his name. Look, I'm being persecuted.
To be fair, there are non-Christians who like to be martyred, so...
I'm sure there are, but you can't hear them.
Specifically talking about Christians here. Yes, they do like.
Yeah, I do. But...
Over all the wailing of the put upon Christians. Anyway, I don't differentiate. I don't have an anti-Christian bias. If you believe in God of any religion, you're stupid. So I'll just be equal and even-handed that way. Anyway, what we are reading, 2 Kings. That's T-O-O. 2 Kings the 5th. Do we have any opening comments about that or anything else?
Yeah, this is mainly Naaman's leprosy.
Oh, leprosy, yes.
Yeah.
Something's falling off of me. I'm not half the man I used to be since I contracted leprosy.
Yeah.
Oh God.
We're continuing the stories of Elisha's miracles.
Yeah. Yeah,
this chapter
until he dies, basically.
So wow, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I know. Some guy from way back when.
He's not
died.
like Elijah. He wasn't
like
Elijah
Jesus.
2.0.
No,
he literally is Elijah 2.0 because he has double the spirit of Elijah. Right?
But he still had to die like a normal person and couldn't be sucked off in a whirlwind of fire, which is metal as fuck.
I guess.
Yeah, and this one in particular, there's the whole immersion thing, the whole miracle there. I'm sure Christians are going to look at that and see there's baptism, there's Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Who's reading today, Mark?
You've been volunteering.
I'd be happy to, sure.
Yeah. I think you can finish this chapter. It's 27 verses.
Okay. Homer, we haven't even started it, okay? Like, come on.
I'm just I don't have a response.
He's ready for his commentary, that's for sure.
Yeah, I just thinking maybe
Just reveling in my Canadian freedom, the question still remains, Tomer, since I know you did your homework. When should I take the gummy in the course of reading this chapter?
Now?
Thank you.
I'm not supposed to be the arbiter of these things.
Hey, listen. Just be glad she's following your directions for once.
So it's like a switch thing. I see.
Yeah, it's a switch. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you sweet summer child.
Please, let's start reading.
Okay, I'm gonna be reading from the NET, which is sometimes a questionable translation, it seems like. But yeah, this was the project of many of my seminary professors. So who pays honor? Okay, chapter 5. Now Naaman, the commander of the king of Syria. Naaman. Naaman. Okay. Now Naaman, the commander of the king of Syria's army, was esteemed and respected by his master, for through him the Lord had given Syria military victories. But this great warrior had a skin disease. Raiding parties went out from Syria and took captive from the land of Israel a young girl who became a servant of Naaman's wife. She told her mistress, "If only my master were in the presence of the prophet who is in Samaria, then he would cure him of his skin disease." Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. The king of Syria said, "Go, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman went, taking him with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 suits of clothes. He brought the letter to the king of Israel. It read, "This is a letter of introduction for my servant Naaman, whom I've sent to be cured of the skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill or restore life? Why does he ask me to cure a man of his skin disease? Certainly you must see that he's looking for an excuse to fight me." When Elisha the prophet heard that the king had torn his clothes, he sent this message to the king: "Why did you tear your clothes? Send him to me so that he may know there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood in the doorway of Elisha's house. Elisha sent out a messenger who told him, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan. Your skin will be restored and you will be healed." Naaman went away angry. He said, "Look, I thought for sure he would come out, stand there, invoke the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the area, and cure this skin disease. The rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Farfar, are better than any of the waters of Israel." Please correct me.
Farpar.
Yeah. The waters of Farpar. "Could I not wash in and be healed?" So he turned around and went away angry. His servants approached and said to him, "Oh, master, if the prophet had told you to do some difficult task, you would have been willing to do it. It seemed you should be happy that he simply said, 'Wash and you'll be healed.'" So he went down and dipped in the Jordan 7 times, as the prophet had instructed. His skin became as smooth as a young child's and was healed. He and his entire entourage returned to the prophet. Naaman came and stood before him. He said, "For sure, I know that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, please, accept the gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As certainly as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will take nothing from you." Naaman insisted that he take it, but he refused. Naaman said, "If not, then please give your servant a load of dirt, enough for a pair of mules to carry, for your servant will never again offer burnt offering or sacrifice to a god other than Yahweh. May the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to worship, and he leans on my arm, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this. Elisha said to him, go in peace. When he had gone a short distance, Gehazi, the prophet Elisha's servant, thought, look, my master did not accept what this Syrian Naaman offered him. As certainly as the Lord lives, I will run after him and accept something from him. So Gehazi ran after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and asked, is everything all right? And he answered, everything is fine. My master sent me with this message. Look, 2 servants of the prophets just arrived from the Ephraimite hill country. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 suits of clothes. Naaman said, please accept 2 talents of silver. He insisted, and he tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags along with 2 suits of clothes. He gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them for Gehazi. When he arrived at the hill, he took them from the servants and put them in the house. Then he sent the men on their way. When he came and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, where have you been, Gehazi? And he answered, your servant hasn't been anywhere. And Elisha replied, I was there in spirit when a man turned and got down from his chariot to meet you. This is not the proper time to accept silver, to accept clothes, olive groves, vineyards, sheep, cattle, and male and female servants. Therefore, slaves. Thank you. See? Therefore, Naaman's skin disease will afflict you and your descendants forever. When Gehazi went out from his presence, his skin was white as snow.
Yeah, this is an interesting.
That's
little
where white people
narrative.
come from.
That's funny. That's funny.
You are all lepers. Good to know.
Yeah, so this one's interesting. So I noted I don't remember the chapter. I'm sure Tomer has this written down somewhere. So this reminds me of a few things. So we have the whole narrative of Miriam, right?
Mhm.
But we also
mainly because it's leprosy. So
well, yeah. But there's also I forget which narrative this was a part of, but taking Earth back with you, like some dirt from Israel. So it is interesting that this ritual could only have been done in the Jordan, or I guess in Israel, right? That was like the whole point of the story. So that's why he wants to take some of the dirt back.
I thought it was because he had to sleep on the earth or sleep on the dirt from his homeland, and no, that's vampires.
Yeah, no, this is no. Actually, then God is a vampire because God can only be worshipped on the. And this is it's very indicative of the spiritual beliefs at that time that the God is sacred to a specific area, that it's his land, this is his earth, his region. He controls this, and if I wish to worship him, I have to take a bit of it with me as a touchstone, a lodestone, much the way an idol would be seen.
Yeah. So the dirt would be tied to the land. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a specific reference to carrying dirt in the Bible, though it should be noted that according to Amos 7:17 and Hosea 9:3, foreign soil is like unclean, at least.
Well, I mean, sure, that's kind of the whole.
So the whole
that's
planet
kind of why you want to be buried.
Except your dirt.
Yes, but that's kind of why you want to be buried in Israel, right? You don't want to be, don't want to die somewhere else. Don't want to be buried somewhere.
Don't want to be buried in dirty dirt.
Definitely not. No. No, I could swear there was another story, I think it was in the Torah, where someone took some dirt with them somewhere, but I don't remember.
Oh, are you
So
Do you remember
Montgomery.
any identifying feature from that story besides the dirt?
Yeah.
Are you
No,
talking about? There's a
But
story
it might
with
have
Moses.
something to do with the leprosy. But maybe that's just me making up a memory.
There's a story with Moses and Eliezer where they have like where they're fighting against like the 5 kings or whatever, and there's a story that they used. They threw dirt at them. The dirt turned into arrows and weapons.
Yeah, I get. Yeah. That's the 4 kings against the 5.
Yeah,
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think there
And
is
then
any
the-
reference to like dirt being carried by some.
There's
There are
also the
some
story of
stones.
I have a couple of
There's a-
references from antiquity about something similar. Montgomery in the critical commentary points out that this, in fact, the transfer of holy soil was an early example of a widespread custom. He said he cites the report of Benjamin of Tudela, where a Jewish synagogue in Persia, in Persian Nehardia, was composed wholly of earth and stone
Nehardar,
brought from Jerusalem. And then another example was from the Empress Helena, who similarly transported holy soil to Rome.
Mm.
It's interesting on several levels.
I mean, it's late. It's very late, so could be like maybe influenced, especially given the Christian. These are Christian or Jewish views, right? I think Benjamin Toledo was probably Jewish. Yeah.
Well, you can see the gloss in how it says, instead of, I will always honor this God who healed me, there is no God except your God. All the other gods are fake. Like that very much comes off as something written much later than this would have occurred if any part of it were real. But I also note, because we were mentioning the bit about the Christian persecution porn fetish and in it for the struggle. But there's a bit of that reflected here in the behavior of Naaman too. If Elisha had said to him, you must climb this mountain and on it you will find a tiny flower and, you must fight some monster and bear it back in a crate or a jar and, and do some convoluted, really difficult thing. Then yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll go do some ridiculously complicated thing and have the great
down
story
the
out of it.
mightiest tree in the forest with
A herring. Yeah. Well, but we love the story. We love the struggle, at least the idea of it. But if it's just go dunk yourself in this dirty river.
Well, it's one of the biggest rivers in the area.
He clearly didn't.
So what is this?
Oh,
This person
speaking-
said that they were there in spirit. So they're doing astral projection now?
It kind of sounds like that.
I mean, the reading in 26 is Lo libi halach, which literally means my heart did not go, or something like that. So I don't know if libi, heart, refers to spirit.
Yeah, I mean JPS translates it as spirit as well.
Yeah, it does.
Go along with his man. More or less,
But, I
it's
mean,
like
you guys
does-
are reading
do
out
I
of
not know
you're
what
reading the
happened?
original Hebrew, right? I mean, what is your impression?
Original.
Yeah.
I mean,
closer than what we have.
Yeah, but I don't think there is a
If it's
a
not
textual
original, what
variant.
language was this written in?
Greek.
Shut the fuck up, Tomer.
Far. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, McKenzie's reading is interesting. I walked along mentally as Naaman got down.
Well, I mean, if in biblical language the heart is like, the seat of emotions and stuff, it's kind of pretty much what we would think of as the mind.
He
So-
writes that. Yeah, he writes the detail of Elisha's description is due to his heart, quote unquote, i.e., mind or consciousness, accompanying Gehazi.
Yeah, I mean the Greek also does have heart, my heart.
It's somewhat poetic language, but it does seem fairly typical that in these stories, God always tells the prophet what's going on behind his back, which is why it's so shocking when he's like, something is wrong, but the Lord has hidden it from me, as opposed to just not knowing, which would be normal if you haven't seen someone in 3 months to know what's wrong with them.
And yes, on that, he does say, like, I don't know how accurate this is to Hebrew, but did I not go with you in spirit when someone left his chariot to meet you? Like,
wait,
yeah,
it's phrasing.
כאשר הפך איש מעל מרכבתו, that when a man turned upside down his chariot or something like that. No, sorry, when a man הפך turned upside down, I guess. Or maybe
backwards, maybe.
הפך מעל maybe could be a like reference to going down from the chariot.
Yeah.
So I could
to dismount. Yeah.
הפך איש מעל, though
It could refer to like turning over when you get
no,
up.
but like the specific thing is because it's not like it's not specific about like, oh,
it doesn't say the man,
saw
it says a man.
Yeah.
So like there is like something being hidden there, but he kind of knows like the rest of the transaction.
Though I should know that Targum reading in the spirit of prophecy was known to me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Also,
I guess that would make sense, but like that's one interpretation. But also the another thing I found kind of neat was Ramon there, right? Because like it would be a parody of Raman, which would be a reference to
I guess so.
Was it to Hadad, right? Yeah, to any kind of storm god, right? Because it means thunder.
I guess so. Though, again, I think Haman is.
You're talking about the word Romim?
No,
so,
Haman.
Okay, so in 518, it says Ramon, which the NRSV notes. The Study Bible says it means pomegranate, but it's a parody of Raman, which means thunderer, an epithet of the Aramean storm god Hadad.
Yeah.
Which would basically be equivalent to Baal.
Yeah, I think it appears in Zechariah 12:11.
I mean, they're supposed to be Arameans, not Canaanites.
Right. Yeah. So it would be Hadad.
So I think.
Yeah. So this is like kind of like a little jab at their god.
Yeah.
Because
definitely.
like that god couldn't do anything, right? It had to be in Israel, and it had to be this god.
No, Zechariah mentions Hadad Rimon. Okay.
Oh.
But yeah,
So be Hadad.
It appears also in Tabrimon as well.
It's creepy really how Christians use this story about the young girl being, because she was presumably a captured slave. That this is like, oh, it's okay if terrible things happen to you, because maybe God will tell you to send this man to the prophet, and yada 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 yada. Which, like, on one hand, if terrible things are happening all the time around you and you're like want to make peace with it, then okay, fine. But you're telling a safe, prosperous person that it's okay, terrible things will probably happen to you, but God's using them for good. It's like, great, thanks. That's awesome. Love that for us.
Or he's testing you.
Oh yeah. Or he's just a raging cunt. But anyway. The other thing my father particularly found very interesting about this story is that essentially he gets a free pass on one point of idol worship. Not that he's worshiping the god himself, but if he's going in with the king, and granted, these are in the days of absolute monarchy, where if like you made the monarch sneeze, he could have you dismembered. He has to go in and observe the forms and bow with the king and whatnot. And he seems to get a pass on that, which is normally not something you get a pass for. The Jewish religion, if there's one thing they're really, really firm on, it's no other gods. So do you guys, Isaac, Tomer, have any insight on that particularly?
Regarding what?
Regarding the fact that he got a pass for sort of kind of participating in the worship of another god? just when he was with the king and kind of had to as part of his courtly duties, presumably.
Let me just check. I mean, yeah. I mean, who says this? Yeah, McKenzie. Right. I mean, I have a comment on this, so.
Okay.
I mean, I think because I think he's as a non-Jew, like the idol worship restrictions are slightly different.
They're a little less
because
stringent.
one of those. I mean, in general, like that's one of the things that according to Judaism, like non-Jews are supposed to keep as well. Like besides not murdering and stealing and having courts of law and eating live animals. One of them is like you can't worship idols, but it's a bit less strict. So I understand like saints and imagery and stuff is fine because it's technically they're still worshipping Yahweh, but just like in a roundabout way. So like that technically it's like if they're kind of worshipping Yahweh in the wrong way, it's fine. But if they like if they make idols of and worship them, then that's idol worship.
Oh, so I have to make an
Something
idol
like that.
Got to keep up on my blasphemy.
Something like that. So like it's not forbidden, for example, like the whole Trinity and crosses and all of that stuff. It's forbidden for a Jew. It's not forbidden for a non-Jew under those laws, as far as I remember.
The Quran, though, it is as specific about that. Lawrence.
Oh.
Against it, there are some surahs against the Trinity, right?
Oh yeah, there are plenty.
Oh yeah,
yeah, they're very specific.
Right. But remember that Christianity, Islam,
say that God has partners or other family members, and specifically the son.
Yeah, so we did like since we've been doing the readings, it seems like whenever the references are to partners, it wouldn't be to like a divine family, it would be more to just the Trinity, because like those are used together so often.
But it also has, like, at least in antiquity in that region, God having a wife and sons and whatnot in variations of even if they don't recognize it as being the same God, the religion of the region definitely had those elements. So it seems to also fold in under that prohibition. Not that we're covering.
Yeah, but like, I mean, but you have to remember, like Islam, like Christianity, they're universalist religions, so there's no such thing as different rules for non-Muslims and Muslims. Under Islam or under Christianity, everyone has to keep the same laws regardless, and a Muslim is just a person that follows the rules. It's not like you identify as a Muslim, therefore you have these rules, and if you're not a Muslim you don't have to follow them. It's everyone has to follow the same rules. With Judaism, it's like Jews have rules, certain types of Jews have different rules, and non-Jews have like 7 rules.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it gives me the impression that Judaism is almost like, not specifically a monastic order, but something like that, in that you are the in-group that follows the harder level rules for the religion. And you wouldn't expect, like, Catholics have nuns, but not everybody is expected to wear the wimple and do all the things.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think the expression like nation of priests is used, and like I mean the idea of a chosen nation is supposed to be like chosen to do those extra things, kind of, and like there's stories that were brought up with like God went to all of the nations of the world and they said, will you keep these 613 laws, and each nation would find one that was like, no, we can't, we can't do that, it's part of our culture or whatever. And then when he asked the Israelites, they said, we will do, and we will like we'll do it, whatever. And then they said, oh, what are the 613 laws?
Yeah.
And so they're special because they didn't even ask.
They said yes
questions.
without
they were
thinking.
just like, yeah. So that's why we're special, because we don't think.
Yeah.
Is that the reason for the renowned Jewish prayer, "O Lord, in your mercy, choose another people"?
May God keep the Tsar far away from us.
Yeah.
From all of us.
Okay, so I should start. We'll start on verse 1 about Naaman. The name means pleasant, which McKenzie notes was a well-attested name in Aramaic and Ugaritic. and appears in the Bible elsewhere, where it is usually tribal. This was seen in Genesis 46:21, Numbers 26:40, and 1 Chronicles 8:4 and 7. Sweeney writes that Naaman's identity marks him as an ideal figure to demonstrate Yahweh's power in creation, most notably in Aram. He writes, quote, "As the commander of the Aramean army, he is responsible for Aram's military successes against Israel. Highly regarded by his king, he has little reason to abandon his position to serve the god of his king's enemy," end quote.
And the war god who he apparently beat in battle several times, so that's always fun.
Yeah. On that same verse, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. According to Josephus in Antiquities 8:414 and Midrash Tehillim 78, Naaman was the one who killed Achab by drawing his bow at random and hitting the king, as we see in 1 Kings 22:34. According to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer 16, because Laban the Aramean showed kindness to Jacob in Genesis 29:22, Yahweh granted a reward to Laban's children, quote, so that there be no reward for the wicked in the world to come, end quote. I guess.
I'm gonna reward your kids here so I don't have to do shit for them in the new world. Oh wow.
Like that is a thing, right? Like, you know, like in this world you get punished or rewarded or whatever, but that affects your reward or punishment in the afterlife. So it's like there's like a story of this like couple. They were really poor and everything bad would happen, but they were like very, you know, they believed in God, a strong heart or whatever. And the wife like told the husband to pray to get some, like, they need money or whatever. And the next morning they found like a golden table leg in the house. And then they wanted to use it to get some money, and then they decided, like, no, we need to, like, where does it come from? And then they prayed again, and then they had a dream, and in the dream everyone in heaven was eating at golden tables, and their table was missing a leg. So they were like, pray for it to go back so that they won't stick out.
Oh yes,
You know what I mean?
because
Like,
our social standing in the world to come, which totally exists, is far more important than our being able to eat and feed our children today. This is a common religious attitude that is idolized, and it makes me want to scream.
Yeah, it's a stupid story.
Christianity has plenty of those too.
Okay, McKenzie writes that the phrase is an addition by the prophetic narrator, i.e. post the H, which implies that Israel was being punished for unfaithfulness. He writes, quote, "It also assumes Yahweh's power and control of events beyond the borders of Israel, in accord with Naaman's confession in verses 15 and 17. It casts Naaman as a person favored by Yahweh, despite being the Aramean commander, and makes clear at the outset that Naaman's healing is Yahweh's doing, albeit through his prophet. PN's revisions account for the lack of clarity about Naaman's disease. In the Legenda, it was assumed to be debilitating and ultimately fatal. But
Debilitating.
Yeah.
I think I said debilitating, and ultimately fatal, But Naaman's social interactions with the king of Aram, Elisha, and his servants in PN's editions compromised this understanding. On that same verse,
I do want to mention quickly, so in this story, the king of Aram is just called the king, right? He's not named. Yeah. And earlier we had a king called Hadadezer. And later on, we're going to get a king called Ben-Hadad, who's replaced by Hazael. And I think from like archaeology, the timing and stuff, it should be just one king throughout this period called Ben-Hadad. So that's what they normally associate Hadadezer, Ben-Hadad is the same person. But then now, so it's almost like you can see how these three stories, even though they're set in the same time, and so should have the same king, two of them have different names, and this one doesn't even have a name.
It does come off very much as one of those stories that we tell for other reasons than its historicity, and we don't want to complicate
that's
it
also
with
true.
details.
Right.
Be...
This story you could make this story happen anytime, as long as the miracle worker you want is alive at that time.
Well, and I think maybe that's part of the reason why Elijah and Elisha's names are so similar. You can always just, oh, no, it was the other one. Yeah, the timeline doesn't line up. It's the other guy.
No, I think Ben-Hadad II was ruled quite a long time. I mean, these Israelite kings, they don't rule very long. So he was king for like at least 40 years, I think. So
that's actually remarkable in that area.
Yeah, so it's very possible that I think that's what it says. Let me just double check that. So it's very possible that he was king for both the time of Elijah and Elisha. So yeah, whatever.
Okay, on that same verse, he had leprosy. In Hebrew, metzora. In the Hebrew Bible, tzara'at refers to various kinds of skin diseases, mold, and fungi in clothes and houses. According to Leviticus 13, 45, and 46, a person suffered from leprosy is ritually unclean. Suffering from leprosy. And Leviticus 13 and 14 describes procedures for ritual purification of people and houses after the disease is cured. Sweeney writes that since its causes were unknown to ancient Israelites and Judeans, cause and cure were ascribed to Yahweh. Hens-Piazza writes that while the narrative doesn't give any information regarding the nature of Naaman's disease, nor the social consequences resulting from it, it is clear that his response to the prospect of a cure suggests that leprosy was more than just a nuance.
Yeah, it was clearly serious. And leprosy, I mean, you think about actual leprosy can kill you. So I can understand why people took it seriously, but it's also hard to identify between various fungi. I'm just not sure why, like, because there are courses for treating it. We've been over them. It's blood magic. You kill a bird and dip another bird in its blood and spray it all over, and that cures your mold.
It's not really curing it. It's more like making you pure.
Yeah, I mean the leprosy, the saras or leprosy in, at least in the like the priestly sources, doesn't seem to be referring at all to actual leprosy. It's some sort of magical skin element that affects buildings. So
also,
it's all to do with spiritually.
So that's purity. What I should have done with the black mold. Okay, all right. Well,
Just I looked it up. Ben-Hadad II he ruled for like 42 years, and the reason it feels long is because he was king during Ahab, Jehoshaphat, Joram, Ahaziah, like quite a few kings in succession in like two kingdoms. So that's why it feels like it was a long time.
Right. Okay, on verse 2, a young girl. In Hebrew, na'ara ketana. Chazal in Talmud Chulin 5a wrote, quote, "It is difficult for us to understand why the verse calls her a young woman, na'ara, and also calls her a minor, ktana, which are two different stages in a girl's development. Rabbi Pedat says she was a minor girl who was from a place called Na'aran."
It's so stupid because it's not like when this was written that they were using the Talmudical, life stages that they developed later on. Like Katana, Batula, Nara, Isha, whatever, right? Like these are very like technical terms that they developed over time. They're assuming that the Bible was written using the same terms. So they're like, how can someone be both a young woman and how can someone both be a teenager and a child at the same time? It's like, because words have more than one meaning. But, yeah.
Mark, did you get the Sunday school version of this too?
No.
I don't recall anything specifically.
You didn't get like the cartoon backstory where she's captured by a raiding party and made a slave, and it's all very
Well, they have to explain why she wants to help her master.
Yeah, and then it's
like
slightly not a dick.
Okay, so on verses 4 through 6, Fritz comments, Naaman, as a powerful state official, can rely on the full support of his king, who turns to the king of Israel as his peer. The delivery of the royal message by Naaman only reaffirms what is already implied. The insight that no human can offer a remedy for the disease, not even the king of Israel himself. It is only God who can help. The acknowledged insufficiency of humans prepares for the true extent of Elisha's miracle. End quote. Although it seems curious that Aram's king commissioned Israel's king to cure Naaman of leprosy, since the girl identified the prophet in Samaria as the source of healing, Hens-Piazza writes that Aram's king, quote, was likely respecting the Israelite monarch's prerogative to commission the prophet to do a great deed in his name, end quote. Sweeney notes that the enormous sum of money the Aramean king sends, quote, conveys the gravity of the situation to both the king of Aram and Naaman, and builds upon the depiction of Naaman as a powerful figure, end quote.
Makes a lot of sense.
On verse 7, Hens-Piazza comments, having read the letter from the king of Aram, he tears his robes in a gesture of grief. Pessimism overtakes his spirit, and he imagines the worst. Consequently, he is quick to get things wrong. He assumes that Aram is requiring of him that which he cannot possibly do, and thus is crafting a pretext for battle. Though he knows the power of Elisha from at least one occasion on the battlefield at Edom in 3:11-20, he does not even consider this resource. Instead of problem solving, he responds sarcastically with a rhetorical question, indicating he still has no idea how God does works in Israel in verse 7. Moreover, his efforts to exonerate himself of any responsibility for what he thinks will be an upcoming battle must have been fairly public. End quote. On verse 10, in the Hebrew Bible, the number 7 is a typological number used to represent completeness. It is used several times in Leviticus 14:1-9 regarding cleansing from skin disease. Cogan writes that it is not the Jordan itself that will cure Naaman, but rather fulfilling the act at Elisha's command, which teaches his acceptance of the prophet's authority. McKenzie suggests that Elisha is, quote, prodding Naaman's ego, first by his delay, then by not appearing personally, and now by sending ambiguous directions that may be intended to confuse him, end quote. He notes that Romer observes that, quote, ego and nationalism are obstacles to Naaman's healing, end quote.
God is always very eager to get everyone else over their egos.
On verse
It's interesting that it mentions that he was expecting the prophet to wave his hands like
in a very Moses-like manner.
Yeah.
Abracadabra.
I mean, the whole idea of like magic needs hand movements is interesting.
You know what? It's showmanship. Maybe this is why God wasn't doing so well competing with the neighborhood gods. He just has no sense of showmanship.
On verse
like
12,
Elijah.
sorry.
Yeah, Elisha's showmanship is going behind the door with your son to bring him back to life.
Oh, he likes to play hard to get.
On verse 12, Abana and Farpar. Several commentators identify the Abana River with the Bavada or Barada River, which has its sources in the anti-Lebanon. Which has its sources in the anti-Lebanon range, 23 miles northwest of Damascus. Although most early translations and the Kirei reading have Abana, the Kirei and Targum read Amana, a reading favored by Hens-Piazza. McKenzie writes that it may be influenced by Mount Amana, a name for the anti-Lebanon ridge where the river has its beginnings. The Farpar is generally identified as the El Awaj river. Sweeney writes that it has its sources on Mount Hermon and runs northeast, east, and southeast to water the Oasis region some 10 miles south of Damascus.
By the way, I think, is it more correct to say that it's Parpar? Even though...
I mean, the Masoretic text has Farpar.
Yeah, but it's all Farpar.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow the Greek, maybe farfara or farfar, it could be
Okay, but that they
like
changed the second per to a fur as well, so
maybe, you know.
right. And par is like a word for butterfly, right?
Yes, but I don't think that it appears in the Hebrew Bible. I think it's late. Maybe in
Oh, okay.
Ishnaik.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was like thinking like if it was like because the awaj it means crooked, and it's got a very bendy path, and I was like maybe it's like a butterfly flight. You know, it's very wavy. But yeah, that connection was a bit.
Oh, actually, it's late. It's actually modern Hebrew. It's Eliezer ben Yehuda.
It's probably a
derived
Greek word or something like that.
No,
yeah.
it's Italian. It's
Italian.
It's from it's from
Farfalla.
Farfalla. Yeah, interesting.
That means bow tie, right?
Yeah.
Farfalle?
Well, if it means a butterfly, maybe that's maybe it means
Butterfly. Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Butterfly bow
Interesting.
tie. Okay. Interesting
Yeah.
combo.
So they didn't know what butterfly was, I guess. Okay, so
They
on
probably
verse
thought it was a
13,
type of bird.
I mean, considering that yeah, I guess.
Bats are birds, so why not butterflies?
I guess. Okay, on verse 13.
Well, it's definitely not. It's
sorry.
definitely not dairy.
Or zvuv chem'a, you know.
A butterfly
understood.
is a
Sorry.
flutterby.
It's probably its original name in English.
That's
Flutterby.
cute. That's hate
Okay,
puns, but I'll forget.
On 13, my father, in Hebrew, Avi. The reading my father is preserved in Vulgate. Cogan notes that the calling my father is unusual, and we would expect that the servant will say my lord, Adoni, as seen in 6:16, Genesis 44:5, Numbers 11:28, etc. Thus, Targum and Peshitta read my lord. He writes that this non-formal directive expresses the servant's concern for his health. The Lucianic recension reads, Father, if it had been some great deed, etc. McKenzie writes that Lucianic recension conflates the reading my father and if, im. He notes that the Vaticanus has neither, but the conditional particle seems required. He renders, quote, if it had been some great deed, etc., unquote. On verse 14, Cogan notes that the Christian tradition that the waters of the Jordan purified from sin, as we see in Matthew 3:6 and Mark 1:5 and 9, is based on Naaman's story. He also notes that a late tradition ascribes the healing to Elijah, not Elisha, as seen in an inscription from the 5th century CE in a mosaic floor in the baths of Hamad Gader. The inscription points to Elijah as the healer of lepers who bathed in the area.
That's interesting. They probably have like a different version that they were based on. That was still prevalent in like, was it 2nd, 3rd century CE? Or later.
5th?
5th? Really? The mosaic?
Yeah, that's
5th
5th century. Yeah.
Oh. I thought it was...
CE.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I just want to say that this sort of thing where there's like this superstitious site where people go in and be healed of stuff, it's like all over the place. Like growing up in Colombia, there's this village outside the city that was known for having this dormant, tiny little volcano, clay volcano type, that people would like, get in the clay and like be healed of stuff. And like people would pay to go up there and do it. And it was a tourist attraction. Like this sort of thing has been going on for quite some time. It's nothing,
Really?
nothing
Like
out of the ordinary.
That's interesting. Like a warm, muddy volcano.
Yeah, it's technically not an actual volcano, but something that looks like a
hot
volcano
spring,
that
muddy hot
forms. And then there's like lots of clay and sediment that becomes like a crater that people go in and like get all full of mud and take pictures.
Oh.
Yeah.
The idea that it's some sort of health virtue to bathe in volcanic mud or unusual mud and water and whatnot. That's that's still going on
like that as well.
I have no doubt there are minerals in it, but whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. But is it true that Christians think that the Jordan River has special, like, purifying properties?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's more we just stole all your imagery
fresh water.
because
And I know a lot of people pay a lot of money to go there to be baptized.
Oh
that
yeah,
area.
oh yeah. Because
Like,
then you're
Oh,
being
I
baptized.
thought that was just like a nostalgic one, like
Nostalgia.
that's where what's his face was doing it. The other
John
Harry
the
man,
Baptist.
what's his name?
Jesus.
John the
Jesus
Baptist.
got baptized in the Jordan, right? So
yeah.
You know.
So I can understand that, but I didn't realize that the Jordan River was seen as having like healing powers, like higher.
I mean, I drink from the Sea of Galilee every day, and I can tell you, it's not.
It's not magic.
So that's one of the
Even
best
though
places to go
Jesus
swimming.
stepped on
By
it.
the way,
I mean, it depends.
it's like swimming
have
in the sea, but it's not salty because it's a lake. But
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
warm.
Though you
Really
can
nice.
drown in it. I mean, it happens.
Well, yeah. There's like giant basalt rocks in it
Yeah,
as well. You
yeah,
can't
yeah,
stand
yeah.
on.
Yeah, because it's near volcano area. Okay,
But-
so on verse 15, it's not kinda. On verse 15, now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Fritz comments.
Which how do you ascertain that? Okay, so you had one God answer one prayer and one request. Does that mean that the other gods couldn't answer that request? You didn't even ask them.
I think he's living a life where everyone has idols and stuff like that, and he's never seen an idol actually do something, actually do a miracle. And
Wait,
then
Yeah.
here
Well, how does
sees
he
this-
feel now that he's been cursed to have this disease he was supposed to be cured of, and now his whole family's going to have it for all time?
No, that's the servant
That's
of the
Elisha's servant. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Gehazi. Yeah. The big warrior, he gets healed, and in a sense, you could say that by taking the money from him, the servant took the disease from him and brought it upon
So
himself.
there's a family somewhere in the Middle East that, for all time, all their children are born with leprosy, and it's incurable
No.
leprosy. They have all their lives, and their children's children have leprosy, right?
Yep.
They
Well,
went to England.
Wouldn't Gehazi just go take his family to the Jordan and immerse them in there? Like, is it
Because
curable or is it not curable? Like, to
Well,
me,
Well, that's
it-
the thing. It's
the
not
Bible said that
naturally curable.
Yeah,
all
it's
of
not
their
that-
all of their descendants were going to be cursed with this for all time.
Although, how is he supposed to get a woman pregnant if he's covered in leprosy? I'm not banging that.
No, but like I said, it's probably
Makeup.
not really necessarily talking about like leprosy.
That's
Leprosy.
so
It could
funny
be-
of you, Lilith.
It could be
thinking
something like
racist
vitiglio.
back
How do you pronounce it?
If I want a a
Vitiglio?
separate male attachment, I'll just go to the sex store. I don't need to wait for one to fall off a leper.
What does the prostitute say to the leper? You can keep the tip.
Ah!
Yeah.
But, it was likely some kind of skin, like eczema or something.
yeah.
You know,
What is that one where people have like miscolored patches, like vitiglio?
Vitiligo?
with the Lego.
Vitiligo. That's it.
Yeah, but that's just
Yeah.
a pigmentation thing. You got to stay out of the sun, but it's not like
Yeah, but
you
some
know,
people can.
mold.
But like the way that the leprosy and psoriasis that's mentioned, that's referenced in the Bible, it seems to refer to like patches of white skin, with like
No,
maybe like
I
a hair on it or
suppose.
something.
yeah, not
Yeah.
knowing what it was.
Yeah.
Wait, if the hair in it is dark or if the hair in it is white, there were two different.
Yeah, that makes a difference. Yeah.
yeah. I think we covered that in Leviticus.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's,
I'll-
that's priestly nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I have the comment. Fritz writes, quote, verses 15 and 16 speak first of Naaman's reaction. He returns to the man of God to confirm the miracle he has worked on him and to show his gratitude. On this occasion, he professes Yahweh as the only God on earth, which amounts to a statement of consequent monotheism, such as developed only in the exilic and post-exilic period. Monotheism is here understood as the worship of Yahweh as the only God to the extent of denying the existence of other gods. The claim that Yahweh is the one God not only of Israel, but of the entire earth, which precludes the existence of other gods, is found first in Deuteronomy 4, 35 and 39, and Isaiah, in Isaiah 44, 6, 45, 5 and 6, and 18. Given its theological assumptions, the passage relating to Naaman's response has then to be dated to the post-exilic period. On verse 17, Naaman requests to bring soil from Israel's land either to make out of it an altar, according to traditionals, or to build upon it an altar for Yahweh, according to Cogan and Hens-Piazza. Fritz notes Wuthwein's statement that foreign soil is considered unclean soil, as seen in Amos 7:17 and Hosea 9:3. Thus, quote, soil from the land that belongs to Yahweh and to which he is connected in a particular way is therefore part of the proper worship of Yahweh, end quote. And McKenzie comments, quote, Naaman's request for Israelite soil assumes the sacredness of Yahweh's land, which includes the Jordan, and disproves his previous claim about the superiority of the rivers of Damascus. It also betrays the idea that each god has her or his own land and people, and each people and land their own god. Thus, his claim in verse 15 may not be an ontological one. His point, rather, is much like that of 1 Kings 18, where Baal is ineffective. Whether other gods, like Naaman's native Hadad, actually exist is irrelevant. Only Yahweh shows his presence through his deeds, as we've seen in Psalms 86, 8-10, and that was the reason for Elisha's involvement in the first place, end quote.
It reminds me of the song of the exiles on the way to Babylon, when they're like, how can we sing the songs of Yahweh in a foreign land? And sorry, the heating system is making me sneeze insanely. It got colder here, but it's very much that same attitude of God. How would God hear us if we're not in our land, if we're not near our temple, if we don't have that connection? Because the prohibition on idols prevents them from having that, the tchotchke, the thing you carry around that contains maybe not the whole God, but at least a connection to the God, which makes a lot more sense if you're, starting as a transitory people who are moving around a lot. You need something other than, yeah.
It's funny that Lilith, you're talking about the heater. It's like you're living in the olden days. It's already in the 80s right now where I'm at.
I thought you guys were going back to the 50s, but none of the social work bits, just the racism and sexism.
Yeah, the environment is still...
right. You're not going to tax the rich or start social programs like in the 50s. You're just going to have the assholes.
Exactly.
I think it also this connects to the priestly idea that shows up in Genesis of sacred space, in that Yahweh has defined the area, more specifically his temple, where his name or his presence will dwell. And only within that dispensation is he allowed to remain there unafflicted by, I guess, sin or people or whatever would otherwise taint his holiness. And so bringing a piece of soil, a patch of soil over to another area, it's sort of like it's a branch, right? It's like when you have a business and you do a franchise. I think it's something like that.
or like more like a satellite store,
a satellite
pop up. Yeah.
That sounds like something like people have done before, where they take soil from their hometown and put it into the foundation of like their business or something.
Or you take a little soil from the grave of a loved one and carry it with you.
Okay, on verse 18, the temple of Rimmon. This is the only place in the Hebrew Bible which mentions the worship of Rimmon. Hens-Piazza writes that Rimmon was Syria's national deity, functioning like Baal in Israel. Fritz writes that Rimmon appears in Aramaic and Neo-Assyrian sources as a separate deity, although his name is elsewhere an epithet of Hadad. Cogan writes that the name Rimmon is a corruption of the name Raman, which is derived from the root Resh Ain Mem, to make a loud noise. The name Rimmon is influenced by the Hebrew name for pomegranate. McKenzie takes verse 18 to be an addition and notes that the change from Raman to Rimmon further contributes to the disparagement of the Aramean deity. He notes that in the Lusanic recension, Naaman says that he'll be prostrating to Yahweh in Hadad's temple, which is different from the theology behind Naaman's request for Israelite soil, which understands Yahweh as the only effective God. He writes, quote, The verse seems to address the question of how proselytes, especially in the service of foreign courts, were to worship Yahweh outside of Yehud and still perform their duties. Naaman's request for dirt was initially followed in PN's account by Elisha's wish that he go in peace, in verse 19, with his tacit approval of the request. Tacit.
Tacit.
I don't know. No, don't know.
I mean, I think it's Rashi who understands that when he says, "I will bow in the temple of Ramon with my king," he means like because the king is bowing and I'm holding him, I'm gonna have to bend forward with the king. So
yeah,
and I think in many cultures there is a thing where if the king ever bows, everyone else has to bow lower or possibly just get on the ground. So you could even sort of half cover it under the it's not really worship. I'm just respecting the king, and I happen to be in the general direction of an idol, but that's purely incidental.
Yeah, it's very normal in cultures times when you had servants and stuff and bowing. If your master bows, you have to bow.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Unless you're one of the background slaves who's actually getting the shit done that they're making a big deal about.
But then you'd be,
in which case you just keep your head down.
I'm thinking if you're in an entourage, if you're walking behind your master or mistress, they are bowing to someone higher than them, you have to bow together with your masters and not get up until your master gets up.
Yeah.
Which brings an idea. I'm not saying, not elaborating. I'm sorry. Okay.
Do not turn this into an orgy joke, Tomer.
No, it's not an orgy joke. It's a submission joke. So on verse 20, Hens-Piazza comments, we hear Gehazi's thoughts when he decides that Naaman has gotten away too easily, given all that was done for him. Moreover, the justification for the ill he is about to do is betrayed in the way he thinks about the man as that Aramean Naaman. That an officer from the army of Israel's enemy, Aram, should receive a healing and get off scot-free makes for an inequity that Gehazi has a right to rectify. Gehazi's oath before the Lord to take something from this foreigner contrasts sharply with Elisha's oath before the Lord to refuse to take anything from Naaman, in verse 16.
This is something actually that I also was thinking about, because I've brought up a couple times at various points the way that there are very specific social norms and mores in this part of the world, some of which still exist. The thing where, if you compliment a woman's sweater, she has to offer to give it to you 3 times. In certain parts of the Middle East. This very much has that flavor where there is, oh, you must take this gift. Oh, no, I cannot. Not that narrative underneath specifically, but given the whole, commander of the army and prophet of God and spiritual versus, earthly powers, there seems to be a bit of there's definitely an undertone here about the exchange of power, about whether I can say I paid you for your services, or I paid or more insulting, perhaps I paid your God for his services. Whether you could say, whether or not it was intended that way entirely by Naaman, there does seem to be an entire narrative underneath this about power and social standing and how would this be doing. There is dominant benevolence in people and in animals, pigeons specifically. If pigeons are all feeding, only the strongest and most dominant male pigeons will take the position of lookout, and they're kind of showing off. I can afford to miss a meal, and I will take this role. And only, obviously, they have to rotate. But if one of the weaker, more lower status males tries to pull the same thing, they won't let him. So there's a bit of that undertone to it, I think. Possibly the servant didn't really pick up on that. But the subtle elements are definitely there.
Got a comment from My Unfinished Journey, who offers $2.22 and says, "Hail Nero, Aaron and panel. Lepers need lovin' too."
Well, now we have medicine, so that always helps.
Okay, so on verse 23, 2 bags. In Hebrew, it's shnei charitim. The word charitim appears only here and in Isaiah 3:22 as part of a list of ladies' finery. Likewise, early translations render charatim as a type of clothing. Septuagint reads 2 changes of robes, Vulgate 2 changes of garments, Targum 2 traveling cloaks, and Peshitta 2 cloths. Rashi notes that some take charitim to mean long pockets. Cogan writes that the charit was probably a large fabric cover, and takes the cheret from the golden calf narrative in Exodus 32:3 and 4 to be the same as the charit. On verse 24, the hill. In Hebrew, ha'ofel. Kimchi, Gersonides, and Ibn Kaspi take the ofel to be a high place that had a house, as seen in Isaiah 32:14, ofel vabachan, citadel and tower. Likewise, modern commentators render citadel or acropolis. Cogan writes that ofel is a topographical term, referring to the high quarter of the city. We also know of the ofel at Jerusalem, according to Micah 4:8, and the ofel at Dibon, as was in Meshastel, lines 21 and 22. Josephus, in Wars 5:145 and 6:254, writes that Jerusalem's oflas is found south of the temple between it and the city of David. Early translations had difficulty with regards to this word. Septuagint reads, the darkness, Vulgate, the evening, both probably reading ofel with an aleph, Targum, a hidden place, and Peshitta, a hiding place.
Not only with an aleph, but also different vowels, right? It wouldn't be ofel, it would be like afal or something like that to mean darkness.
Yeah. No, I mean ofel as darkness it can be very, yeah.
In the Bible?
Yeah.
Trying to think.
I don't know. Okay, so yeah. On verse 25, Sweeney comments, Elisha's interrogation of Gehazi is ironic, insofar as the following material demonstrates that Elisha already knows what Gehazi has done. Nevertheless, he asks Gehazi where he has been, which provides Gehazi with the opportunity to lie once again. The reader wonders how Gehazi ever could have believed that he could lie to Elisha, but the emphasis on Gehazi's lie to his master removes any ambiguities about Gehazi's guilt. Elisha's rhetorical question emphasizes the use to which Gehazi would put the cash. Gehazi's attempt to take gifts from Naaman is not only dishonest, but it reverses the power relationship established between Elisha and Naaman previously. That is, Yahweh/Elisha give to Naaman, and Naaman is the dependent party. By taking a gift from Naaman, Gehazi has restored Naaman's standing as a power figure. End quote.
Apparently, I think like a commentator then. Take that, people who bitched about pigeons in the chat.
Mm-hmm. And finally, on 27, his skin was leprous, it had become as white as snow. Miriam's leprosy is also described as being white as snow, as we see in Numbers 12:10. Cogan writes that this is probably referring to falling scurf, which appears with those who have harsh skin diseases. It's I think it's also dandruff, but they use the name scurf.
Scurf. I've never heard that term. It's probably
the dry scales, the chat.
Dry, scaly skin.
Especially.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the idea that the person would suddenly become white as snow is meant to emphasize that this is a supernatural affliction of the disease. It's very sudden. Even more aggressive forms of skin disease, they take some time to spread. You don't just wake up one day. You start with a patch and it grows at whatever rate. So the idea that you would just suddenly be completely covered in it, it's clearly divine intervention, because that's how God do.
I also can imagine that in antiquity there were like white garments as much as we have today. Is that like the color white? Like, is that
the bleaching would have been, I mean, there would have been some forms of bleaching, but not nearly what we have today.
Urine is pretty good at bleaching, I think. Wool, don't remember exactly.
Yeah,
they still use urea in certain.
Is it to bleach it, or is it to like soften it and get the itchy parts out of the?
Maybe that's could be that.
If you handle untreated wool, it'll make your skin crazy.
Right. Yeah. It's
okay, and final. Sorry. Fritz writes that the comparison adds to the evidence that the disease was a form of eczema. McKenzie notes that Fricke likened it to vitiligo, and Hulse limits his diagnosis of vitiligo to bohak in Leviticus 13:39, since it presents whiteness without another symptom. I mean, there's more to it in Leviticus commentaries, but...
Of course. But we did go over those, and thank you.
Yeah, though I probably should have used better commentaries. Not Milgram and Levine were fine, just the others too. I don't know, maybe I'll come back to it when I have time.
Okay.
But regardless.
The man is, you are doing a PhD, basically, in this show of commentary from every conceivable angle, and like, dude,
I think you're exaggerating there.
Not that much.
So the Christian commentary this time is, see, this is why Jesus always shows up white in these paintings.
Oh, the origin story of white Jesus.
he was the last descendant of Gehazi.
Yeah.
Left.
Okay, so
that's why he was the only white guy in Jerusalem and back then.
Sounds good. Yeah. Doesn't account for the blue eyes, but okay.
I mean, it's really confusing, right? Like, in one sense, if you're white, you're clean. That means you're like holy or something. But if you're white, your skin is white, then you're diseased. You're okay.
So I'll start with Ephraim, who writes that Naaman was sent to the Jordan, that is, to the remedy capable of healing the whole of humankind, as sin in the leprosy of the soul, which is healed by the power of Christ through baptism.
Of fucking course. I mean, I'll give him the baptism one is at least a little clever. The healing via dunking. But I was only baptized once. Do you have to? Is 7 the magic number?
Yeah.
Do you have to dunk 7 times to get the magic Jesus to 6?
So
stick.
It's interestingly enough. So Jewish people also have a form of baptism, but it's not like fully clothed in a river. There's a whole system. I think we spoke about it recently. But then normally we'll do 3 times is a thing.
Well, you said it's not fully clothed, meaning people are naked.
Yeah.
Oh.
You have to be naked for it to work.
Oh.
Your entire body has to touch. Yeah, you can't. Your body has to be under water. There has to be nothing in between you and. I think there is an idea of. I mean, like when someone converts, for example. They have to go in during the conversion or after the conversion they'll dip in the water, but it's I think it's always naked. I don't think there's no like, oh, you wear a garment and then you have to float and let the garment like move around or anything. I don't know if that's a thing.
Well,
just
as long as it's not a wetsuit, you're gonna get wet.
Yeah. I mean like Orthodox Jewish men will do it once a week or even daily, depending on the community. But that's not really like a thing you have to do. But women going once a month is like considered like a fundamental necessity.
Well, yeah, but that's because of the bleeding and bleeding.
So in that
case,
got a
super sticker
be a
from
woman
Tammy
watching
B.
to make sure.
Wait.
Got a super sticker from Tammy B, who offers $5 Australian, and says hippo character's head.
It's the description of the. It's the description of the sticker. You don't have to say it.
Okay.
Come on, Aaron. No.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds
although I do kind of wonder what Aaron's response would have been to the description to be like, I'm not sure what you mean, Tammy.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. I don't know what the hell this is.
Yeah.
It's quite funny how the hippopotamus, everyone calls them hippos, and like hippo has become like the word, and it literally means
Isaac,
horse.
please don't. I have more Christians.
Oh,
Oh no!
Yeah,
do you have
don't...
hippo of?
Did you run out of locusts again?
No, Augustine of
Oh,
Hippo.
there's-
No,
Yes,
No, no. Okay, so Origin writes that Naaman becomes angry because he does not perceive that it is our Jordan, namely baptism, and not the prophet that removes the uncleanness of those who are unclean because of leprosy and heals them.
I mean, I don't know. That's not even a Christian thing. That's just like basic commentary. Like it's the prophet that. heals, not the
Well, yeah,
river.
but it's our baptism.
Our
you know? Our
Jordan.
Yeah,
it's
no, it's
the,
just-
our Jordan of Jesus' spirit that magically splashes you.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Ephraim writes that Naaman's healing clearly prefigures the mystery of the healing, which is freely granted to all nations of the earth by our Lord through the intercession of the apostles. Caesarius writes that just as Naaman, although he was an old man, became like a boy by washing 7 times in the Jordan, so the Gentiles, although old by reason of their former sins, are renewed by the grace of baptism. And finally, Ephraim writes that Naaman asked for some dust of the promised land in order that the Hebrews might be ashamed that the stranger believed that even the dust of the land was filled with God, while they did not even believe that God dwelled in the prophets.
Okay,
What?
so it was bitchy and passive aggressive in new and very Christian ways. How lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a
Majestic
thing that people
Pete
like
Beck.
kiss the ground when they go to the land for the first time or something.
I mean,
Majestic
I know that
feedback.
Jews do that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Ready? Okay.
All right.
Majestic P. Beck offers $2 Canadian and says, "Does prosperity gospel work here?"
I don't know what that is.
Where do you
He-
mean here?
He added that was his last
I would-
$2, so I guess
Oh,
it's
okay.
Canadian. It's Canadian, so at least he put in his 2 cents, I guess. American.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say so exactly because like the whole thing is that Gehazi here has been greedy. Like it's a
Yeah.
bad thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Gehazi
Oh,
has been.
you're saying here it's prosperity gospel. Like, here's my $2. Will I get more money from it if I donate?
Yeah, he's asking if we are
Oh,
preaching the
okay.
prosperity gospel.
Okay.
And by the power of atheismus, your offering will come back to you 1,000-fold if you just believe.
It's just religious
Mm.
gambling.
Wasn't it is sowing a seed of blessings or some such
Yes,
thing?
yeah, that is
Oh, yeah.
absolutely one of them.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You are stepping out in faith is another one.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in this context, it really looks like it's polemicizing prophets of old being bribed, right? Because it's like you got a foreigner that's coming and say, "Hey, do this," and like I guess Elisha's like, "Well, I'm not gonna take money for this. Like, it's just good enough that I'm demonstrating that Yahweh is the one and only."
I remember Reverend Bobby Tilton here in Dallas. I used to watch his show just when I wanted to get mad. But I remember him saying, "Let's say you want to worship Jesus with $500. Let's say you want to worship Jesus with $1,000. All I'm asking is a vow of faith."
Mm-hmm. Well, it always works very
was
well for
perfect.
the minister.
Let me
Oh,
just grab my credit card.
Hey,
Oh, look at your pretty flume. Oh,
hello.
we can't hear you,
I-
Isaac, but
I also have a
no.
pet.
Isaac.
I also have a pet.
do you indeed? Good for you. Okay, Isaac. Those are not your children.
Those are
You shouldn't
those
have
are
them on screen.
The Bible is not for kids.
Yeah, it is.
nor
it is
nor is it
definitely
for
rated X.
gays, actually.
Oh,
So
true. Isaac, get out of here.
Hey, if you're not going to have another woman on the panel because Lalandra is off doing really important and necessary things that I'm very jealous of, but still, boo, she abandoned me. I at least get a gay BFF.
I asked her to join the show today, but she says she's working overtime.
Oh, I know, and I respect it, but just give her my love, will you? I miss her.
Yep.
yeah, I think we should move on to the next chapter.
Okay. All right. Now this is
What?
Double Kings the Sixth.
I found a new one.
Yes. Read up through 23.
All right. Now, the company of prophets said to Elisha, "As you see, the place where we live under your charge is too small for us. Hold on a second. Let us go to the Jordan and let us collect logs there, one for each of us, and build a place there for us to live." He answered, "Do so." Then one of them
Were they
said,
gnomes?
"What?"
Sorry, they said they're going to cut down a tree to build a home. Are they freaking gnomes?
I'm a little
no,
curious
that's not
how each one of them is going to gather one log.
Yeah.
So there's one log per person for this cabin.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very crowded cabin, no matter how I work it out.
Or they are gnomes who are going to like be able to build an entire house out of one log because they're just this big.
Okay. He answered, "Do so." Then one of them said, "Please come with your servants." And he answered, "I will." So he went with them. When they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was felling a log, his axe head fell in the water. He cried out, "Alas, master, it was borrowed." Then the man of God said, "Where did it fall?" When he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it down there and made the iron float.
I love it.
He said, "Pick it up." So he reached out his hand and took it. Once the king of Aram was at war with Israel, he took counsel with his officers. He said, "At such and such a place shall be my camp." But the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, "Take care not to pass this place, for the Arameans are going down there." The king of Israel sent word to the place of which the men spoke. More than once or twice he warned a place. Yep, that's what it says. More than once or twice he warned a place so that it was on the alert. The mind of the king of Aram was greatly perturbed because of this. He called his officers and said to them, "Now tell me, who among us is betraying us to the king of Israel?"
Somebody
And one of his officers said, "No one, my lord king. It is Elisha, the prophet of Israel, who tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedchamber."
It's not a spy. There's no mole here. It's magic. God is spying on you. It's not our fault. I'm not taking pay from the other guy.
He said, "Go and find where he is. I will send and seize him." He was told, "He is in Dothan." So he sent horses and chariots there and a great army, and they came by night and surrounded the city. When an attendant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. His servant said, "Alas, master, what shall we do?" He replied, "Do not be afraid, for there are more with us than there are with them." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, please open his eyes that he may see." So the Lord opened the eyes of the servant, and he saw. The mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. When the Arameans came down against him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike this people, please, with blindness." So he struck them with blindness, as Elisha had asked. Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek." And he led them to Samaria. How far did you want me to go, Tomer?
23.
Okay. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha said, "O Lord, open the eyes of these men so that they may see." The Lord opened their eyes, and they saw that they were inside Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, "Father, shall I strike them? Shall I strike them?" He answered, "No. Would you strike those whom you have taken captain with your sword and your bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink, and let them go to their master." So he prepared for them a great feast. After they ate and drank, he sent them on their way, and they went to their master. And the Arameans no longer came raiding in the land of Israel.
Okay, this is not the same God at all.
Definitely not. This is a kill him with kindness kind of God, and that's like the one
This
time.
is literally, and like, shall I strike them, Father? They make it sound like the king is bloodthirsty. How many kings have been cursed, deposed, or had their entire line cursed to death and destruction because they left a few women and children alive and God wanted everyone dead?
A few, yeah. Definitely more than one.
Yeah, this isn't like Joshua or anything like that.
It is. So the first part there, that axe head miracle. So yeah, just another one of Elisha's miracles. And honestly, when I was first reading through this on Atheist Sunday School, I kind of failed to see like any other significance to this aside from look at this fancy thing he did. Because like the other miracles, at least, you could say, have like some greater meaning, or they're pointing to something more important, right?
There's a narrative context. Yeah.
There's some sort of underlying propaganda here. And for this one, aside from Elisha being, a man of God, Kat, would you stop knocking down my Bible?
No, the cat has
I couldn't really see anything. So, maybe there's something there. I haven't looked at it since then. So
I mean, I've seen some that compare the miracle here with that of Moses, who also threw a piece of rock, if I remember correctly. Yeah, no, not a piece of rock, a piece of wood. Was it Moses? I think it was
Elisha threw something on a spring. Oh no, wait. Elisha threw Elisha. No, wait. One of them threw a stick or a plant into water to make it pure.
That's
one of
Elisha.
them threw salt.
Yeah, that's Elisha.
But that was.
Well, this is different. This is like something floating.
Yeah, no. I was. Yeah, I think there was a reference to Moses, if I remember correctly.
Moses may have also thrown a bush in water to make it pure. That was after he threw the ground up golden calf into the water to make it bitter.
Yeah, the thing is, this isn't even a there's no purification going on here. Maybe because like the thing is, if you remember the last purification, at least of Naaman, it would have been like here's this prescribed ritual, go do this in this specific place. This has nothing like that associated with it. No. It's just, oh no, I dropped my axe. Could you please?
I mean, there is some. I have some comments on this story as well. So
I mean, it's borrowed. I think it would speak for the monetary value of ironmongery at the time, because it wouldn't have been cheap or easy to replace.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So yeah, I completely made that up. I'm sorry, I couldn't find it on commentators. I thought I remembered something like that, but no.
If anything, like this, I don't know. I feel like I saw something like this in some like Ugaritic text, but like it's not like I do not remember. So I'll have to look into it.
Matt White says, "Sorry, went there in an RV. I knew these were trailer folk." I'm not getting that reference.
Peter, what are you doing?
It's a reference. Like it's a reference to someone who said in the NRV.
Okay. NRV, NRSV. Yeah, that's.
I really want to check some of these books that I have here, but as you can see, I'm kind of preoccupied.
I was trying to find a book earlier, and it turns out I have to reorganize my bookshelf. I just keep stacking books everywhere. I'm going to end up falling over and being buried in a pile of books, which I'm fine with, but I want to read them first.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
my sister had another baby and she's in the hospital, so the kids are in my parents' house and they just like
Oh,
wander in.
no, they're
I had to get their
adorable. I'm
dads.
just concerned about,
Them hearing the
health and
Bible.
safety and
They
legality.
can't hear what I hear, and yeah.
Okay.
Poor Isaac is infested with tiny people.
I mean, in a way, aren't we all?
Hey, there's a reason
Oh.
he's gay. And look at that beautiful cat. She's cuddling
Beautiful.
you, so cute.
I did want to mention it. After you adjusted the camera, Lawrence, your video quality has improved massively. You're almost out of frame.
Yeah, but
That's
I
a
just-
fine Hoover, I would say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
I want you.
I think I'll start. We'll start on verse 1. Too small for us. Kimchi comments, too cramped for us, i.e., they used to sit in a tight spot, because there were so many disciples. And our rabbi said, in Talmud Yerushalmi Sanhedrin 10:2, that after Gehazi was banished from before Elisha, the number of disciples increased, since Gehazi was mean to them, and many were afraid to come before Elisha because of Gehazi's wickedness, who rejected them. After Gehazi departed from him, the number of disciples increased until the place where they have sat from the beginning has turned too small to them.
Of course, the character does one bad thing, or in this case, possibly one socially ill-advised thing, and thus they were always evil and a jerk, which doesn't account for why the prophet hired them in the first fucking place. Dumbasses.
On verse 5, "Oh no, my lord," he cried out, "it was borrowed." Traditionals wrote that the person had no funds to pay for the borrowed axe. Likewise, Sweeney notes that according to biblical law, in Exodus 22:13 and 14, the person is responsible for the loss of the axe head to its owner. Hens-Piazza writes that this could also suggest, quote, the respect for individual property rights as well as the possible consequences for violating the ethos, end quote. Moreover, iron tools were probably expensive, and according to McKenzie, can suggest of the extreme poverty of the man involved, and probably of the entire guild of prophets. Thus, the loss is truly a crisis.
Well, I mean, from what I recall, the prophets were, if they were the hired ones, right, they would be paid pretty well. Unless this is, I mean, I would assume this is the same company of prophets that we've been hearing about.
I mean, maybe, yeah. Disciples
Yeah,
of
but
Bnei HaNevi'im, the sons of the prophets.
the disciples wouldn't be paid much, if anything. And if he had borrowed it on his own, be a matter of whether or not, if he had personally gone and borrowed it, then it's a matter of whether the prophet himself would be on the hook for it or whether the student would be, because this seems to run more like an apprenticeship. And yeah, I mean, it's possible they were all just going to build a second dormitory because there's so many of them now. Or just, I don't know, a lecture hall. Who knows? I always talk. Bigger room.
On verse 6, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. McKenzie notes that several commentators, like Gray, Jones, Rem, and Thenius, have tried to rationalize the miracle, or explain the origin of the legend by positing that Elisha, quote, used a long stick to pick up the iron head through the hole where its handle had been inserted, or to move it to shallow water where the man who had lost it could recover it, end quote. He notes Shanda's opinion that the stick cast in the water caused a wave that carried the axe head to shore.
What kind of fucking stick was this? They launch an entire cedar at rocket speed into the lake.
Yeah.
So he's both a waterbender as well as a airbender, as he did in chapter, was it water 2?
I have
Yeah,
noticed
two.
in a desert region, a lot of the magic is water magic.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
And I'm trying to figure out, how do you lose your axe head where you can't get it back? You're chopping wood in the water, are you? How
No,
deep in the river are you?
I'm
He
assuming
chopped-
he swung and it flew off.
Yeah.
Yeah. It came off the axe handles. That makes
You know,
sense.
the interpretation in the SLB Study Bible is that this would be a new axe head. Maybe that like he threw the stick in there, and then it just like grew an axe head.
Oh, okay.
That's the interpretation that they have in.
The miracle that I think is Rashi is like, or is that he created a new axe handle, threw it in the water, and the handle found the axe head, went into the hole.
Oh, sure.
And then floated up.
And floated up. Of course. Okay. Well, I mean, obviously it was a new handle that wasn't attached very well, so I guess we'll just magic this shit. Okay. Good.
See how well behaved the animals are.
Yeah, I guess.
Quiet.
So they're trying to rationalize a miracle for how it says the guy magicked a piece of iron to float. Why do we need to rationalize that? You got all this other shit going on that doesn't make any sense. There's all this other magic. Why
try to make the miracle bigger? So it's not just like, oh, he put something in the water causing metal to start floating. It was like the handle flew in and came back with an axe head.
So was that like the only axe? So because it would have ruined the project. Like, what's the big deal?
I think because he
said it was a borrowed axe.
It was borrowed.
He's borrowed, yeah.
There wasn't. Remember, this is Iron Age mythology. The iron would have been expensive, and you would have used that axe head until it fell apart.
It's like when your dad comes in and rips up one of your books because you shouldn't be reading that sort of stuff, and then you start crying because it's a library book. Relatable stuff like that.
That's a very specific story there. It may have been too specific. Although there was one time where because I usually have like my notes written out, right? And like my dad was showing one of his friends like this new super sharp knife that he got, and he literally just sliced my notes, and I'm like, bro, what? Like he was like, oh, sorry, I just thought it was paper. Like, dude, it's got shit written all over it. I was not happy. I was like, what the fuck, dude?
I mean,
with so many Bibles, he used your note paper.
Fucking right.
I remember when my dad caught me. What are you doing reading? People that read get ideas, boy.
And we wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
No, my dad didn't like that. I was reading like non-Jewish books, so I had to hide all the library stuff from him. But I'm still reading like a book a week. So
good job.
Okay, he writes, however, that such explanations, quote, misconstrue the genre of the story as legenda and misses its point about the nature of the holy man, end quote. He notes J. Robinson's remark, quote, it is our age rather than Elisha's which seeks always to find justification for stories of the miraculous, end quote. On verse 8, the king of Aram was at war with Israel. The exact historical background behind this note is unclear. Sweeney writes that the anonymity of the narrative contributes to its legendary character, particularly when it turns to the prophet's miraculous powers. Likewise, Fritz writes that the intention is not to situate the miraculous events within their historical context, but rather to emphasize Elisha's supernatural powers and glorify them. Cogan writes that Elisha's prophetic works already started during the period of wars between Aram and Israel. According to the story here, Aram had invaded up to Dothan at North Samaria, the heart of Israel's kingdom. However, raids beyond the borders of each kingdom have characterized the relationship between the two throughout most of the second half of the 9th century BCE. On verse 13, Dothan. Dothan is generally identified as Tel Dotan, 22 kilometers north of Shechem. Fritz writes that the choice of place seems rather arbitrary and allows no inferences to be made about an earlier version. Sweeney, however, writes that Dothan is crucial, both for narrative purposes and for understanding the strategic issues of Aram's invasion of Israel. He writes, quote, Emek Dothan provides access to the Jezreel from Samaria, which makes it possible to control the Jezreel. Indeed, the site of Jezreel, where the Omride dynasty maintained an estate, is located in the very center of the Jezreel Valley, approximately 12 miles north of Dothan. Samaria's strategic location near the head of the Emek Dothan was one of the major reasons to shift the capital from Tirza. Of course, if the Emek Dothan provides access to the Jezreel from Samaria, it also provides access to Samaria from the Jezreel. Elisha's location at Dothan would therefore place him at the very site that determines Israel's ability to control the Jezreel. On verses 15 through 17, Sweeney comments, the narrative portrays an Aramean capture of Dothan in an effort to demonstrate Elisha's power over the Arameans. The servant of the prophet emerges as an important figure. When he awakens in the morning, he sees the powerful Aramean force surrounding the city and asks Elisha, "My lord, what shall we do?" The prophet's response in verse 16 employs a typical example of the prophetic reassurance formula, al tira, do not fear, which is employed in prophetic literature to indicate that there is no need for concern in the face of danger. Elisha prays to Yahweh for the first time, asking that Yahweh might open the eyes of the servant so that he can see the divine army of horses and chariots arrayed upon the hill around Elisha. Such an account draws upon ancient notions of prophetic visionary experience, in which such visions are apparent to prophetic figures, but not to those around them, such as Balaam's donkey in Numbers 22, 22 through 35, and Joshua in Joshua 5, 13 through 15, and Samuel in 1 Samuel 3, 1 through 18. By portraying Elisha's reassurance of the servant, the narrative ensures that the reader understands that Yahweh will ultimately overcome the Aramean threat. End quote.
I mean, it's a very interesting fantasy world that you're surrounded by supernatural powers that you can't see, but that are nonetheless actively either good or evil, for or against you, and that you can invoke them if you have enough favor with the god. Which is, I mean, there was a spiritual warfare craze in my teenage years, resurgence of the Peretti books, that very much was all about getting teenagers to do that. And honestly, I mean, it was something very interesting to engage with compared to a lot of the other stuff in the Bible, but it's fantasy, and nobody is served by someone attempting to enforce their fantasy on reality. Just LARP on the weekends like a normal nerds and leave the rest of the world alone.
LARPing every weekend, that's pretty good.
That's Christianity.
I actually do have a friend that does LARP every weekend.
Oh wow!
And she has a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned this before. I remember learning something like where it's like, Shedim or demons in the sort of like neutral sense, like a genie. They're everywhere, and then that's the reason why there's like inertia and friction. It's because like you're pushing against this like, like all
Angel
the demons
that's
and whole
pushing back, or a djinn.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Fun.
Well, not necessarily pushing back. They're like you're in a sea of demons, and you're like, when you move your arm, you have to move through them.
So what if you're having sex? Is that aided by demons?
Well, they give you a bit of space.
Actually,
they give you a bit of space. That's why you're able
to move out of the way.
Did you write? No. Did you read St. Augustine's defense? I think it was St. Augustine's defense of the faith, where he was trying to justify why other worship had been banned, because this was when the Roman gods worship was banned, and he talked about, because of course between the Greeks sort of stealing everybody else's culture and piling it into their own religious ideas, and that going in with the Roman conquest, they kept doubling and tripling up. And he used the example of sex specifically because you had a little god or goddess or nymph or muse for every little thing. He's like, so what? This is ridiculous. We just have one God. Look what you have. You have, this is the god of lust, but this is the god of marriage, but this is the god of sex. And then this little nymph takes care of the ejaculation, but this one, the penetration, and this one, the blah, 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 blah. Like literally there was like a distinct nymph for sperm at this point, as different from falls. And like at some point it just got ridiculous.
And gods are also interchangeable with spirit. So you can have the spirit of this. The spirit of basket weaving is the god of basket weaving. The spirit of
it's like if you look at mythology, it's like sometimes you like where is the border between like a god and a spirit? like what's the difference between one of the, or even the Titans? Why aren't the Titans gods, and why are the children of
in that
why
sense,
the
though,
ocean
gods do
is
exist because it's just a
why the ocean is
personification
like
of natural
spirits,
forces.
not as it's interesting.
I mean, the differentiation between that always relies on the culture. It's different from culture to culture, right?
Yeah,
Like
every culture
sometimes
sees it
it's about their knowledge of fate. Sometimes it's just like the amount of powers that they have. Sometimes how many epithets they have. Yeah, stuff like that. Different from
like
place.
you got your kamis and your
true.
yokai.
Well,
like what's the difference? Where does it change? Yeah.
The Greek-Roman one became more convoluted because they kept stealing everybody else's ideas and folding them in. So you just had way too many everything. It was like literally throwing everything in the fridge into a recipe. It's not going to taste good. That's not like, unless you only have 3 select things in your fridge, it's not going to work. So it just gets overwhelming. But yeah, it in that sense, you could almost say the gods do exist because they're a personification of natural forces. And we see this, it's very easy to understand in larger, Zeus, lightning, blah, 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 blah. But literally just the, the pushback from Newton's laws that, equal and opposite reaction force. That's not a demon. That's just matter existing.
Yeah. Makes sense. I mean, I think it's probably based on like, when you're in water, you feel the fluid, you feel it, you see it. And then it's like, well, we don't see the air. We don't. So where does this feeling come from? It's like the wall is invisible matter that's, that's there that you just can't see.
That air just is the fluid that we naturally are in, so we don't notice it. Unless we're out of it, then we notice it.
On 18 through 20, McKenzie comments, "The blindness is caused by a dazzling flash of light. This does not mean, as some commentators aver, like La Barbera and A. Jirku, that the soldier's malady is disorientation or confusion rather than loss of sight. That explanation is based on English or German Blendung, meanings of dazzle rather than the Hebrew. It is also driven by the effort to explain an inconsistency in the present story of blind soldiers following Elisha."
Inconsistency.
No. I think, wait.
Unless you missed
inconsistency.
No, it's inconsistency. It is a word. Lack of suitability or congruity.
Lack of suitability. Inconsistency.
Yeah. I will type.
Honey, I think it's just a typo. It's inconsistency.
No, it is
That's
not a typo.
with...
It is not a typo.
All right.
There's your word of the day.
Is it the one that's spelled with like a double N at the end?
Yeah.
Inconsistency.
Yeah.
Lack of harmony, proportional elegance.
Yeah.
Interesting. Inconsistency.
Is this about the blindness?
Yeah, it is also driven by the effort to explain an inconsistency in the present story of blind soldiers following Elisha on the 4 or 5 hour journey from Dothan to Samaria in verse 19. The problem, quote unquote, is negligible because it results from the nature of the legenda and its focus on the wonder. The walk to Samaria might even be considered part of the wonder. Elisha's prayer and the attribution of the blinding to Yahweh are editorial and what we have come to expect of PN. They continued the theme of second sight from verses 14 through 17, playing on the notions of true vision and blindness, a theme that is perhaps developed from chapter 2. In a sense for PN, the Arameans cannot tolerate the glimpse of the divine force that Elisha and his servants have enjoyed. The blindness ended for the Aramean soldiers in the legenda when they reached Samaria and Elisha opened their eyes in verse 20. PN revises this with a third prayer and restoration of vision for the Arameans attributed to Yahweh. End quote.
It is a really cool story. He basically casts confusion on them all, leads them to the guy they totally want to get, and just walks in with a captive troop into the city, in the middle of Samaria, where presumably the entire army in Samaria and all there are like right there with arrows, like, okay, what are you doing? He's like, hey, captives, remove confusion spell. It's a cool story. It's a hell of a way to get a lot of prisoners of war, but
On 21 through 23, Fritz comments, the final scene tells of the sparing and the release of the prisoners. Elisha outspokenly objects to the death sentence envisaged by the king of Israel. In this way, he is revealed as a defender of life and justice, even and especially concerning the enemy. In the background lingers the fact that the enemies, released after a feast, can now bear witness to Elisha's singular power. They can give proof from experience that all further action is futile, and that even the king of Aram stands powerless against this omniscient man of God. And finally, on 23, a great feast, in Hebrew, kera, which is a hapax. Early translations interpret the word based on the context. Thus, Tanchum and Peshitta read a great feast, Septuagint a great serving, and Vulgate a great provision of meats. This reading is favored by traditionals and modern commentators. Some have suggested comparing kara with the Akkadian keritu, which also refers to a feast, and is derived from the root keru, to call or invite. Though McKenzie writes that the differences in initial consonant and meaning make this derivation suspect. Hallett notes the Arabic karai, to feed a guest or give a feast, and Old South Arabic karum, banquet or Chaldic feast. Yeah, that's it on my part.
Okay. So you want me to continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Sometime later, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mustered his entire army. He marched against Samaria and laid siege to it. As the siege continued, famine in Samaria became so great that a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver and 1/4 of a cob of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. Now,
dove's dung?
Dove's dung.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I mean, the Hebrew it's div yonim, which is
It's
like
an acquired taste.
I mean,
I'm
there
gonna
isn't
say-
there are explanations to this, and
It's
I'll get to
possibly
that.
a
But
fuel
I should,
source rather than a food.
yeah, but there are some explanations. But I should note that the Kerei reading is Charei Yonim, which is like more explicit. I mean, Charei,
Yeah,
which
it's
literally
literally
means
like shit. Shit off the doves.
yeah.
Now, as the king of Israel,
Unladen
Yeah.
by shit.
Yes.
As the king of Israel was walking on the city wall, a woman cried out to him, "Help, my lord king." He said, "If the Lord does not help you, where would my help come from?" What a dick. Well, that's the same place as everybody else, because I mean, God doesn't actually help anybody. He helps the people who help themselves. In other words, you do the work.
Well, you know, what could he possibly do? He's only king.
Yeah.
Not like he has any resources.
Yeah. Let's see, from the threshing floor or from the wine press. But then the king asked her, "What is your complaint?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give up your son. We will eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give up your son, and we will eat him.' But she has hidden her son." When the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now, since he was walking on the city wall, the people could see that he had sackcloth on his body underneath. And he said, "So, may God do to me and more if the head of Elisha, son of Shaphat, stays on his shoulders today." So he dispatched a man from his presence. Now, Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. Before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "Are you aware that this murderer has sent someone to take off my head?" When the messenger comes, see that you shut the door and close it behind him. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? While he was speaking with them, the king came down to him and said, This trouble is from the Lord. Why should I hope the Lord any longer? Why should I hope the Lord any longer?
Hope in the Lord?
Why should I hope in the Lord any longer? Okay.
Yeah.
This is badly written, this section. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ambiguous in the Hebrew who's talking. and also it's like it seems to be implying that the messenger is going to pop in as we're speaking, but then he doesn't. So it's like,
I mean,
or he does,
yeah,
but it's
Or he got news from someone and is like, oh, I see the king's coming behind him then.
Let me just check if. I mean, I think that's basically a mishmash of the sources. It's
that makes more sense.
Both the prophetic, both prophetic legenda and prophetic narrator.
You can't tell if it's ambiguous if it's like the messenger or the king is complaining to Elisha, or Elisha saying, "What can I do?" Yeah.
Or if he's talking. Yeah. It's interesting how these, we just have a story where he captures all these soldiers and then they never come back, and then the next minute, Samaria is under siege.
Also, why is he in the city?
Yeah.
Why is he in the city? Yeah.
I didn't think he lived there normally, but you know, whatever.
Didn't they just build him a house by the Jordan? Yeah.
Squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, narrative consistency is not a thing. Maybe God shouldn't write and drink.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse 24. Sorry. Ben-Hadad, king of Aram. There are 3 Ben-Hadad in the Bible. Ben-Hadad the first, son of Tabrimon, who was a contemporary of Asa and Baasha in 1 Kings 15, 18 through 20. Ben-Hadad the second, who fought against Achab in 1 Kings 20. And Ben-Hadad the third, son of Hazael in 13, 24, and 25. Fritz takes the Ben-Hadad here to be Ben-Hadad the second, since he was a contemporary of the Omrides and can be dated to the mid-9th century. Likewise, Sweeney writes that this points to Achab's role in ensuring the destruction of his house, since he failed to capitalize on the opportunity to destroy Ben-Hadad. McKenzie, however, writes that this identification is tenuous, and even the very existence of Ben-Hadad II is questionable. Instead, he argues that the likely identification of the king of Israel as one of the Jehuites, i.e. Jehoahaz or Joash, places the story in the early 8th century rather than the mid-9th century. Thus, the Ben-Hadad in this story is Ben-Hadad III, an identification favored by Cogan and Hens-Piazza.
Okay, so they say that the story is completely in the wrong place. It's talking about the next Ben-Hadad, but Elisha wouldn't be around at that time, would he?
I mean, I do get the feeling that a lot of these prophetic stories would have been told by various people about whatever their local prophet was, and then eventually someone tries to harmonize the whole thing and ends up attributing, 6 or 7 different people's rumored stories to one dude.
Yeah, but
much like I think happened with Jesus.
Yeah, but if we're gonna have the story about how Hazael kills the king before him, right? Wouldn't that be Ben-Hadad II? Isn't he called by name?
I'm having a little bit of trouble following all this. So we use the prayer to let the leaders see, meaning I guess just to agree with me. Okay, that's nice. Completely opposite of what he did when he goes to harden somebody's heart so that they keep the disagreement going when they don't need to. But then we're gonna blind all these people so that we can walk them into Samaria and then give them lunch. And I don't know what the Samaritans are thinking about all that. But then, so they've eaten all the Samaritans' food. Now they go away, and now now that they're not under a spell anymore, and they've had their lunch, now they're gonna turn around. And they're gonna attack. Is it the same people or different people?
It's supposed to be the same people, but it's supposed to be like a few years later. Like that story was kept them at bay for a few years, and then they came back and laid siege again.
That's a different time.
And did they attack? They did. They just waited till the next season. Okay, gotcha. So not this never again thing.
They weren't that impressed by the
and never again. Like, it's like Trump. When he says he'll never do something, and then does it the next day.
Yeah. Okay. So now they've got all these people. Now Samaria is starving because they've got a bunch of people surrounding them because they already ate their lunch, and now the king is going to. They're being attacked by some. They're not under Elisha's command, right?
No.
The fuck does he got to do with anything then?
Well, he's the prophet. Well, he's supposed to make God fix it.
He's basically moral support. He's the cheerleader.
Yeah, his role is to speak about the times.
Yeah, like the thing is, if you wanted favor from the gods, you go to the prophets. That's why you hired so many.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, like for the narrative, they're going with Elisha.
So when you need a favor from the god, you send somebody to cut the prophet's head off.
Well, he's blaming.
Well, it's
him
more
for
like
the,
he's
for the
already
famine.
failed at this
He should
point.
have done something by now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so God failed.
People are eating their babies, and
or Elisha failed by not intervening sooner.
Okay, so God or his prophet, both of them, either of them failed. Why did the Bible just say that?
From the king's perspective, yeah.
Yep, God and his prophets are not reliable people.
Well, the thing is,
God is anything
he's
but
gonna
fickle.
he's going to kind of bounce back from this, I guess, and show up the king.
Yeah, well, he only let it get to the point where people were cannibalizing their own children. So really, what's the issue, right?
Yeah, seriously, it's not a big deal.
What were you expecting?
At least according to God, because remember, Deuteronomy 28.
Yeah.
Of course.
Always fun.
Yes. And then when they're going to eat the lady's the woman's kid, and she hid the kid. Well, then just eat her. There's more meat on her anyway.
Well, there is an interesting interpretation, I think, from the traditionals regarding this, and I'll get to that later.
Much as I hate to say it, at various points in human history, cannibalism of especially like newborns, because they weren't going to survive a famine, and basically you're just preserving their resources by eating. It's horrible to say such a thing, but that's basically the kind of thinking that was behind.
Yeah, and it's probably talking about like a newborn, because like it only lasted one day. So
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So then Rachel Light says cannibalism in the Bible. Didn't know that, or am I wrong?
Yep.
No.
There wasn't. We found it in Deuteronomy 28 as well.
In fact, God was threatening them with that.
Yes, he will drive them to the point of cannibalism. He likes to fuck with people.
Yeah, he's going to make you eat your children, and he's going to enjoy it.
Couldn't it just be, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, like hyperbole? Like the situation was that bad that people were eating babies, but not necessarily.
I mean, she says, "Give me your son, and we shall eat him today." I don't think you can read any
they want to
more
eat
from
the
that.
other one, and then they're like, "Oh no, I'm not going to give you my son." That's crazy.
If it killed a teenager, there would have been more than one on him.
Yeah.
I know. This refers to transubstantiation.
If you want to argue,
eating the body of Christ, which is the Son. Am I doing it correctly? I think I did.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you are. Yeah, you're doing a good job.
You caught the infection.
Yeah, and the other son that's missing is
now you get it.
Second coming. I don't know. But if you want to say it's hyperbole, then the whole story has to be a parable, right? Which is you could say that.
Phillips, I'd rather eat Hodgkins.
Right,
He's not kosher, sir.
Okay, so on verse 25, a donkey's head.
You can't not have a Monty Python reference ever on this show.
Obviously.
Yeah. On 25, a donkey's head sold for 80 shekels. A donkey is an unclean animal, according to Leviticus 11:18 and Deuteronomy 14:3-8. And so this describes the siege conditions and starvation, which led the people to eat even unclean animals. Hens-Piazza writes that the head of a donkey was normally waste that butchers disposed of, though such waste might be used to boil broth for a poor person's stew. Sweeney notes that the price of 80 shekels is considerably high, given that in Nehemiah 5:15, 40 shekels is considered a very heavy tax burden. Septuagint reads 50 shekels of silver, probably under the influence of 5 shekels in the verse. Fritz, citing H. Gunkel, notes a parallel in Plutarch, Artaxerxes 24:2, where during the war against the Cadusians, the Persian army was forced to slaughter their beasts of burden when the famine was so great, quote, that one could not buy a donkey's head for less than 60 drachmas, end quote.
This is why This
I
is
thought
why
you said a
Lauster
story from
says the
Utah.
worst policy in war
That's
is to
Plutarch.
besiege walled cities.
There's
Not
a
siege.
there's a Persian dish called kalepache, which is a goat's head. It's quite the delicacy. You eat the eyes and the brain and
I
the
mean,
tongue.
I'm good, thanks.
I think the Icelanders also has this.
With
I
fish
forgot
eyes?
what the name of no ship head.
Sheep.
It's called svid. Yeah, it's svid. Yeah, it's basically a ship's head.
I think the issue with the donkey is that that's the last animal you want to sacrifice because that's like the
Yeah.
workhorse, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, it's unclean, so
it's unclean for food, but they were fine for apparently riding and carrying loads and
yeah. Okay. I should also note that although most commentators and early translations render donkey's head, some have suggested reading Chomer instead, which is a measurement unit. Kimchi notes that some say this. McKenzie notes Winkler's proposal to read Chomer Tirosh, a homer of new wine. Although this is accepted by Shanda, this reading is rarely adopted.
also, what was with eating bird dung? Because like I've heard
Now.
of burning cow dung
Yeah,
because you have an actual patty, but like,
Well,
yeah.
it's an
So
example of something that's bad, right? Something that should be
yeah,
the cheapest.
This kind of stuff
cheapest
pops
thing.
up among the prophets a couple times. I think, what was it, in Ezekiel? There was a thing with dung.
yeah.
was it the
Yeah.
one where he had to remain bound on his side for 300 days and he was going to cook his food over?
Yes.
He was going to have to cook his food over his own dung, but he begged to God for mercy, so he was allowed to use cow patties.
Yeah,
as
something
fuel.
like that. Yeah.
According to JPS, there is a term that is in Akkadian the same term, dung, dove's dung, could mean like it could
Yeah.
be like a colloquial term for a food, like carob seeds.
Yeah, there are
So
several
FPL
suggestions.
says it may have been slang term for some sort of inedible seed pods or husks. But consider,
or
okay, the
not
thing
the
is,
seed
I know in later traditions, like they were taking like when it comes to like dung in their stories, they were it was always like like a sign of the destitute, and like living in like complete squalor. Like in the Testament of Job, Job spends like a good chunk of that story just kind of living on a pile of shit. And then his wife is all like, "Come back
your
home."
spores with a potsherd.
Yeah.
Well, how do you know he's a king? He hadn't got shit all over him.
So I'll start on the seed pods. That's the NIV reading. Hebrew for seed pods, is divyonim in Kerei or chareyonim in Ketiv. All early translations, traditionals, and most modern commentators take the reading to refer to dove's dung. Kimchi explains that divyonim is more euphemistic than chareyonim. Some scholars, however, suggested amending the word to something more sensible. As McKenzie writes, quote, Winkler prefers charei, white meal, for chareyonim, regarding the remainder of the word in the Masoretic text as a lithography of shemanim. Klosterman suggests chartzanim, sour wine. DeVoe vocalizes chartzonim, which he takes as a reference to the Star of Bethlehem, a bulbous lily, or ornithogalum, or wild onion.
Which
as
is
he
a
read,
flower called the Star of Bethlehem, which is a modern name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
As he renders it, the tuber of which might have been eaten by the poor. Chain reads charuvim, which means carob pods. End quote. Still, the reading dove's dung is accepted among commentators, but the exact purpose of the dove's dung has been debated since antiquity. Josephus, in Antiquities 962, wrote that the dung was a replacement for salt.
What?
Imagine that. Yeah.
We're out of salt. I'm going to season my bread with dove shit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, no. It's got to be a slang term for something.
Yes, I'll continue. Kimchi and Ibn Janach, cited by Botseko, suggested that dove's dung was used as fuel for fire, because during the siege the people couldn't come out of town to gather wood. Kimchi notes that his father Joseph's opinion that this refers to pigeon crop. Quote, the pigeons will go out and eat the produce, and when they enter the town, the people would gather what was in the pigeon's crop and eat it. End quote. Gersonides proposed that the produce was destroyed, which led to many seeds to be spread around, and the pigeons would eat plenty of them, that they couldn't digest some of the seeds, and so some of the seeds would remain in their excrement.
There are plants that come from seeds dropped by bird dung. There are. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So likewise, Hens-Piazza wrote that undigested seeds could be rescued from dove's dung by the poorest in society to plant a few stalks of wheat or corn. Several modern commentators, however, suggested that dove's dung is an idiom for a food item. Cogan notes that in an Akkadian lexicographical text, a term chala or ze sumati, dove's dung, is defined as zer ashagi, charubu, i.e. carob seeds. Thus, dove's dung was a popular name for different types of inedible husks. Likewise, Fritz writes that this refers to the fruits of the carob tree, which, while edible, their bad taste led them to be used mainly as animal feed. McKenzie notes that this reading nicely parallels donkey's head in describing an exorbitant price for a typical inedible item now being sold as food.
Actually, yeah, husks that you would normally feed to animals. That makes some sense.
Mm-hmm. On verses 26 and 27, Hens-Piazza comments, as the king of Israel is walking on the wall surrounding the city, a woman cries out to him, help my lord king. The king, presumably still Jehoram, responds in his characteristic fashion. He abdicates responsibility and indirectly blames God. He, who is in charge of the nation and its well-being, claims not to be accountable for the crisis at the winepress or at the threshing floor. Moreover, he assumes that the woman is calling for food. Whether it was the harshness of the famine or the presumably emaciated appearance of the woman that made him jump to this conclusion, we do not know. Emaciated, sorry, Isaac. Indeed, the woman is experiencing a crisis surrounding food, but not in the way that the king thinks. When he finally gives her a chance to speak, what she discloses far surpasses the expected plea for food that the king is anticipated. End quote. On 28 and 29, Fritz notes that the slaughter of one's own children as a sign of extreme want is also mentioned in other biblical sources, like in Deuteronomy 28, 52 through 58, Ezekiel 5:10, Lamentations 2:20 and 4:10, and Akkadian sources like the treatise of Esachadon, lines 448 through 50 and 547 through 50. McKenzie notes the parallelism between the stories here and the case of the two prostitutes in 1 Kings 3:16 through 27. Whereas Solomon exhibited decisiveness and great wisdom, Yoram abdicates decision, tearing his clothes in grief and threatening Elisha. He writes that the contrast might point to the decline of the kingdom since Solomon, and the story here might be an adaptation of Solomon's case, though the differences between the two are telling.
It does sound much more like a historical king than a mythical king. Something goes wrong, abdicate responsibility, have a tantrum, blame someone else, and break stuff.
And kill people.
Yes. Well,
and also, on that, it kind of props up Solomon in a way when reading it in that context, because he didn't have to deal with that. He found the workaround for it.
He did.
Yeah, he didn't let the baby get chopped in half.
Yeah, you know what the best part of baby is, don't you?
The ribs?
The back ribs.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always
baby back ribs.
It's always wiser not to kill the human being,
Yeah. Generally,
the wisdom of Solomon was unparalleled.
Yeah. Don't cut babies in half. Cool.
On 29, she had
Use a
hidden
blender
him.
instead.
Sorry. Yeah. She had hidden him. Though the literal reading suggests that the woman hid her son so that he'll survive, according to Josephus in Antiquities 966 and Gersonides, some traditionals, like Rashi, Kara, and Kimchi, based on Pesikta Rabbati 29, wrote that she already killed her son, but wanted to eat him alone.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's it. She hid her son inside a large pot with a lot of lettuce and carrots. And
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Quite the kosher meal.
Yeah. Similarly, McKenzie writes that it is possible that both boys have died in the famine, especially if they were infants. He notes his wife's opinion, Amy McCarley, that, quote, the king's lack of judgment in the matter might support this possibility and diminish the harshness of the assessment of the two women, end quote.
Right. So if they just ate the babies because they had nothing else, but they were already dead, it's not as bad as if you murder the babies that weren't going to survive anyway and then eat them. Goody. Mm-hmm. Lovely. Don't you just love the world God sets up? That's all our fault.
If the woman had killed the babies, then that would have been bad because they belonged to their fathers.
Right. Sorry, I forgot. It has nothing to do with the sanctity of human life and everything to do with the fact that men own everything and women aren't people. Silly me.
Yeah. On 30 and 31, Sweeney comments, the king's reaction indicates his own sense of despair. He tears his garments as a sign of mourning, and the people see that he was already wearing sackcloth, another sign of mourning. This is a remarkable portrayal of the king of Israel, since royal ideology indicates that monarchs ruled with the support of and blessing of Yahweh, as we see in 2 Samuel 7, 1 Kings 11, Isaiah 7, 36-39. His concluding statement, cast in the form of a vow to remove Elisha's head, indicates his outlook. That is, Yahweh has abandoned Samaria to its fate, and Elisha is a traitor who failed to employ his powers to intercede with Yahweh.
It is kind of the job of the prophets to stand between the wrath of God and the people. I mean, Moses is supposed to have done that at Mount Sinai when, God was pissed off because they had a party without him. And he says, I'll just kill these people and I'll start over with your family. And Moses has to, do the narcissist appeal. But that would make you look bad, sir, surely, because you made such a big deal out of getting them out of Egypt. Don't let yourself look bad because of them. Yeah. Best argument against genocide, apparently.
On verse 32, Sweeney comments, Elisha is sitting in his house with the elders. The location of the house is not given, although it is presumably in Samaria rather than in Dothan, since Samaria is under siege. The presence of the elders in Elisha's house suggests that they have gathered to consult the prophet for an oracle from Yahweh. Compare Ezekiel 8:1. Their deliberations will be interrupted by the king's messenger sent to arrest Elisha so that he might be executed. Of course, Elisha's divinely granted powers enable him to see the approach and purpose of the messenger prior to his arrival, much as he was able to tell the Israelite king all of the Aramean king's plans and words in verses 8-23. The prophet's view of the king is well expressed when he refers to him as this son of a murderer. Such an epithet would call to mind the king's present purpose, but it would more probably refer to the role played by Achab, father of the present king Jeroboam, in killing off the sons of the prophets in 1 Kings 18. And finally, on 33, Cogan comments, the exact continuation of the events is unclear. From the next conversation, it seems that Elisha is speaking with the king, not with the messenger, and the aide hears it in 7:2. This is apparent from the repeated description of the scenario in 7:17. Thus, it seems we should amend the text and read the king, Hamelech, instead of the messenger, Hamalach. Josephus' reconstruction of the event in Antiquities 969 and 70 is acceptable. Quote, Elisha said, when the one who has been ordered to do this arrives, be on your guard against him as he is about to enter. Press against the door and keep him in check. for the king has had second thoughts and will follow him, coming to me. End quote. And they did what had been directed when the one sent by the king to do away with Elisha came. Joram, however, regretted his wrath against the prophet, and fearing that the one ordered to kill him might already be doing this, hurried to prevent the murder from happening and to preserve the prophet. End quote.
It reminds me so much of Ingersoll. Actually, I should send you the sources for the Aaron. I know you would love to listen. You can listen in audiobook form too to the lectures of Colonel Ingersoll, the book Assembling Them, where he talks about how gods have always been and how they, the people will set the god up on a pedestal and worship him. But if famine comes and the god doesn't fix it, then they will tear him down from his statue and drag him through the streets and spit on him. But then if the trouble goes away, they will take him back and dust him off and say, we were too hasty, but you were overlong with your help. Let's just let bygones be bygones. And, it's exactly the same dynamic, except with the prophet instead of the idol.
Atheist Carpenter says, was the donkey a dirty animal when God was talking to Balaam?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, the donkey wasn't like, I don't remember if it was listed as a dirty animal.
It's not one of the clean animals.
Yeah.
But it's also like the fact that the prophet, for example, or like the Messiah was supposed to like ride in on a donkey, right?
King David did.
Yeah. So
it's like a horse, right? It's not an animal that you would eat, but it's also not like a dirty animal that you should
right?
avoid.
Yeah.
Mr. E added to that and said, "A clean donkey is better than a dirty ass."
Oh.
Aye.
Then I'm going to start hitting people for bad puns.
Had to.
So, Comer, you got any Christians?
Yes, I do. So Ephraim wrote that the house of the sacrifices of the law is too small for the greatness of the gospel of Christ. Okay. So Caesarius, Tertullian, Justin Martyr, and Ephraim all said that the axe lay in the water because the human race had fallen into the abyss of all vices in miserable ruin. But the piece of wood thrown into the water by Elisha signifies that Christ will ascend the gibbet of the cross to lift up the human race from the depth of hell.
Mm-hmm.
The gibbet of the cross?
Gibbet.
Is that a thing? Isn't a gibbet where you hang people from, hang
them from the gibbet. I mean, honestly, in function, the cross.
It's a crossbar at the top of
Caesarius says this explicitly, gibbet of the cross. So I don't know what this refers to.
What's it called? The thing that people get a gallows.
No,
Yeah,
the gibbet was something else. You would leave people there to die of thirst and hunger and exposure, not like hanging. But yeah, in function, the cross would have been more of a gibbet than anything else. I mean, you would slowly suffocate, but you might be out there for days and starving and scorched by the sun and, pecked at by dramatic crows.
You're right, it is gibbet. I didn't know that.
Gibbet, yeah.
Yeah, gibbet. It's just another word for gallows. Yeah.
Mm.
But if you're thinking of little cages that they would put people in, I think those are called something else.
So Ambrose said that where there is perfidy, there is blindness. So rightly the army of the unbelievers was blind, but where there is faith, there is an army of angels.
Dude, Ambrose.
Yeah.
I read some of Ambrose's thoughts on Genesis for my biblical flat Earth video, and that guy is a fucking dope. I fucking swear. What a fucking idiot that guy is.
It hurts my brain.
Speaking of idiots, going back to that comment, Tomer, about from Caesarius, his logic on the whole axe thing says a river derives its name from the idea of flowing, since all sinners are said to flow along clinging to transitory pleasures. For this reason, that axe lay sunk in the river and mud. Like, are you serious?
Yeah, God hates it when you enjoy yourself, so you have to feel guilty about it because it's dragging you to hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess.
God, it sucks to be a Christian.
Ephraim wrote that the famine, which forced the Samaritans to practice cannibalism, symbolizes the lack of heavenly nourishment, which affected in those days all the nations of the earth. And the donkey's head signifies the teaching coming from the philosophers and scientists of the world, and it was an abominable and rotting food, but was very precious until the famine reigned over the earth. Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah. And Origin... No, not Origin. No, not Origin. Yeah, just Ephraim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. I was wondering if it sounded like you had another Christian in there.
No, that's it.
Alrighty then. We're gonna push back to we might be able to squeeze the other one in, but I gotta run to something, so I can't jump to the next one today. So we good with what was it, the 2 Kings 7?
Yes.
Yes.
That is halfway.
Oh my God, he said it right.
Well, just to keep you on your toes, I'm sure. It is kind of like
crazy.
the tail end of this story, but it'd be an interesting place to start. Last time we'll have to do last time.
Yeah,
Second Kings.
Very good. All right. Any closing comments, Lawrence?
Yes, I do, absolutely. Join the Discord, my Discord. I don't know if I don't know.
I mean, it's already a consensus among
Discord.
among
There's already.
I don't even think he even.
There is already a Discord server in the chat. Not yours though.
Great.
I'll put yours in too.
In that case, go fuck yourself, Peter.
All right.
And also, one more thing, Aaron. I think you're gonna have to just go to a thesaurus and look up a few numbers to see more synonyms. So you're not just relegated to two and second and other silly ways of saying
Biking.
I said junior and I said sequel.
No,
sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Night, everybody. Thank you for being on.
Get it.
I hate you all.